That summer, the old house wore lilac in its hair and a sun-warmed sleep across its boards. And I believe the world could be coaxed to stay within the fence line of our yard, if we spoke to it softly enough. I was 6, and certain the days would hold forever, the way a coin holds a moment when you press it flat between 2 fingers and pretend there is no edge. The house did not look tired, not outwardly, only patient. As if it had heard countless children tell the same small lies and still kept the truth in its ribbed chest. Our kitchen window faced the river that braided past the orchard like a finger combing through hair, and in the long evenings the air would thicken, as if the house itself were exhaling a sigh you could taste. We came to town with the last of a generation's excuses and promises, moving into the place that stood crooked and proud at the edge of the village. As if it had swallowed a hill and learned to swallow again. My grandmother, May, kept a tidy ruin of a garden and a ritual for every season she could narrow down to a single sentence. The ritual I remember with the tenderness one reserves for a lullaby and a bruise. On the solstice, as the light pulled long eyelashes of gold across the floorboards, May would lay a flour-dusted cloth on the kitchen table. There would be a handful of coins that glinted like river pebbles, and a small seashell that seemed to carry the sea's memory within its spiral. We children spoke the names of those who had walked out of the world long enough ago to be a little fog still clinging to the grass. We whispered them aloud, not to wake them, but to invite them to drink tea with us in the stillness of the room. Then May would tuck the coins and shell into a cracked wooden box and slide the box beneath the floorboards to sleep with the house's old secrets. We were told, in the way grown people tell children secrets they will not fully understand until much later, that the house remembers most keenly what we forget. And there was a name in our circle of whispered leaves that never quite fit the others. Mara. She was my cousin, a bright thing with a laugh that could throw sunlight like a handful of coins into a dark pool. The storm that came when Mara vanished was said to have washed her away. We did not forget Mara, though we learned to pronounce her name with an ache that felt like rain on a tin roof. The first tremor of unease came not as a scream, but as a sigh. It was a door that settled when no one had moved it, a hinge that released a small relieved breath whenever someone passed, a room that seemed to brighten when I stood still. The hall mirror, an antique thing that caught the edge of the lamp's flame and refused to show me the room beyond. Only a softer, altered version of it began to weather its own memory. Mara's voice, soft as a moth's wing, would drift down the staircase and vanish behind the sound of my own feet climbing up. The river returned at dusk, as it always did, murmuring about weather and time. But that summer it carried another tune, the tune of a girl's name braided into its current. Mara's name, like a thread that could pull the entire fabric of the house toward a single point. The attic held the sound, the way a shell holds the sea. If you pressed your ear to the wooden floor above the kitchen and listened, you would hear the house speaking in a language of footsteps you could not quite pass. May kept the circle exact and gentle, but the house began to breathe in ways I could not name. The wallpaper swallows in a field of peach and dust would unthread itself at the corner of my eye, showing a line of pale, childlike hands pressed against the paper's other side, as if Mara herself was learning to push through the wall, inches at a time, learning which seams opened most easily to the outside world and which to the inside. The well in the yard gave back a sound, far away, a laugh that was not mine and not anyone else's, from a place deeper than water. A sound that felt like a memory the house did not know it remembered until the moment it did. We thought the coins had power, as children do when the world seems to tilt and a superstition feels like a stubborn map folded into a pocket. But even then, I knew the mapping was not what bound Mara to the old house. It was the scent of May's lavender sachet. The way the coin's glow would die into a pale glow when Mara's name was spoken aloud. The way the small shell's spiral would catch the lamplight and hold it as if to say, "Stay. Stay until the river forgets to sing." I grew older, with the house not aging at all. A strange patient clock that kept different hours for each of us. My own children came and went in their summers, and still the circle of the solstice returned like a faithful chapter in a book we kept reading aloud, even after we already knew the ending by heart. The house learned to permit the past to exhale within its walls, and the walls learned to exhale back in turn. It was a quiet agreement, a treaty written in dust and in the way paint aged into the shape of a sigh. Then came a day when Mara's memory came to us not as a rumour or a rumour's echo, but as a living, present thing. I was old enough to be mindful of the house's temper, and yet the tremor I felt was something I had earned by living with it for decades. The sense that Mara had never entirely left. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen as if she belonged there and belonged to no other world. Her dress was a dress I could have sworn I had seen in a photograph. One of those faded pictures May kept in a cedar chest, the ones that smell of rain and old letters and weathered corners of life. "You've kept me here," she said, and her voice came with a warmth I could nearly trust. The voice of a girl who believed in the world's particular patient mercy. May's floorboard box lay forgotten under the floor, the coins glistening with a light that was not quite daylight and not quite shadow. Mara stepped closer to the box, and when her fingers brushed the lid, the room seemed to tilt in a small, grateful apology to the memory we placed there and forgot to thank. "I asked you to forget," I whispered, not out of fear but out of a stubborn fidelity to a ritual that had saved us many times from a worse ache. "I asked you to let me keep you safe inside the house." Her smile, soft and sad pale as the moon on old paper. "It was never about safety," she said. "It was about keeping the last hinge from rusting shut." The last hinge. The idea entered me as a realization that felt both too obvious to be true and too strange to be invented. The circle of coins was not a lot to keep Mara out, but a sequence, an invitation, or back. The coins were not charms so much as a map drawn on the floor, a way for a memory long past to step forward into the present. If only the present would hold still.